Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to be here. And as was mentioned by the chairperson here, I will be speaking in English, but I have a lot of experience speaking in English in Japan. So I hope I will be nice to you, and I hope you will try your best to keep up with me. The title of my talk is The Complex Primate. So some of my stuff is complex. I'll try to break it down. But before I start, I would like to thank the organizers of this ELCAS program. I think it's a really nice initiative for Kyoto University, and it's great for me to have a chance to see all of you guys so young. Makes me remember, I can barely remember when I was that young as well. But it is really exciting to be able to communicate to this kind of audience. And I hope that some of my presentation will be boring, but I hope that enough of it is exciting for at least some of you to try and encourage everybody to get into science. Science is so cool. There's so much that we can do. Okay, and so I'm going to follow up a little bit on President Yamagiwa's talk and fieldwork, and also primates, and try to also touch a lot of different fields of science, okay, as I go through. Which way do I go? So I have always been interested in the natural world, all right? And the natural world shows us many amazing things. So I'll be talking about a lot of amazing things in this hour. But 3 pictures up on the screen right now, they're all pretty amazing things, and they're all part of the natural world. But they're really hard to understand. So in the first image, on the left side, you see a school of fish. A school of fish performs amazing behavior as a unit, okay? It's like if everybody in this room, the ELCAS unit, decided to get up and run around in the same direction with each other, you might do something that looks like a school of fish. But remember, a school of fish is not really talking to each other. Nobody is telling them to swim around in a collective unit like that. Yet, a school of fish can display some beautiful patterns in nature to escape predators and generally to move around. All right? Difficult to understand. In the center, we have a murmuration. It's called a murmuration of starlings, European starlings. Same thing, beautiful patterns in nature. All of the birds coordinated together, but not talking to each other, okay? Just doing similar things, following simple rules, creating amazing patterns. The last one is, anybody been to Africa? Anybody seen any termite mounds before? This is a termite mound. Shiroari creates it, okay, with very simple behavior. But the final product is really amazing, okay? We look at this in nature, it's fantastic. It's amazing to think such a small animal with a very small brain, okay, but a lot of individuals can do things like that. So I'm interested in how these patterns in nature evolve and appear, all right? And so in this talk, I have a couple of central concepts, okay? And the first concept here is that, so I am a behavioral ecologist. It means I study animal behavior and I study ecology. And in those fields, we know a lot about what an individual fish does, how it moves, how it swims, how it mates, how it finds food. We don't know much about how a school of fish behaves together, although we're starting to know more and more of that now. So actually, complexity is one of the last major areas in my field of science, okay? Nature is complex. So in this talk, I'm going to talk about 2 things. The first one is called behavioral organization. How are all of these animals organized together in a way that creates these incredible complex patterns? And the second thing is about nonlinear dynamics. Nonlinear dynamics, maybe some of you have heard of chaos theory or fractals. Those are the things I'll be talking about and how they relate to behavior and ecology, okay? Okay, so just coming back to my title, those are the two things: chaos, nonlinear dynamics, fractals, and animal behavior. And the second one, if we go back for a second to this image, this is a lot of different fish. This is a lot of different birds, and a lot of termites make this mound. They all interact together in social networks, okay? And so the second part of my talk is actually about how information or anything moves between individuals in a social network. I'll try and put these two topics together. They're very different, but they're also all based on complexity in the natural world. Okay, so chaos and fractals. That's maybe not something they teach in a regular high school. If you go to super science high schools, maybe you've heard of these topics. In the 80s, this became a really popular field in math and mathematics. But more than a century ago, some mathematicians started finding really difficult, complex patterns. Not in nature, but in mathematics, okay? And these patterns are complex because, like, take the top one here. This is the Cantor set. It starts with a line, just one line like this. I'm switching hands. I'm not very good with my left hand. So one simple line, but if you cut out the middle, now you have one line here, a space, and another line. You cut out the middle, and you keep going all the way down. What's the problem here? If you want to measure something about this, like how long the lines are or how many pieces you can get at the end, there's no answer, because you never reach a point where you can't make a space in between two lines, okay? Because in theory, this would be infinity, right? We can always cut a line in half or in a third. So it's impossible to measure this kind of thing using normal mathematics, all right? Same thing here. Very simple thing is happening. I take a triangle and I make a peak on each line of that triangle. And I keep doing this. I could do it 1,000,000 times. I could do it 1,000,000,000 times. I can do it for the rest of my life and never stop, okay? There's no end to that kind of stuff. This is what a fractal is, okay? It means an object, incredibly complex object that has simple rules, okay? Very simple rule. Take out a line, make a fold, whatever, but creates an incredibly complicated pattern, all right? And it ends up looking like a snowflake. Same for this triangle here. You just make triangles in the middle and you go all the way down. And finally, the Mandelbrot set. And here's what's cool about the Mandelbrot set. Just take that in for a minute. How long can a high school student watch this image? Let's see. It's amazing, actually, because we can zoom in as far as we want. It'll never stop, okay? And the pattern inside is always looking like the original pattern, okay? This is the essence of a fractal. Well, what's amazing is that in nature, most of the things you see are also fractal, okay? They're incredibly complex to measure. They don't really have beginnings and ends or any way to measure how long they are or something like that, because there's so much structure, you know? There's so much structure in the clouds. There's so much structure in the cliffs. There's so many branches and structure in a tree, okay? And so some people figured out in the 90s, or in the 80s actually, if we want to make a mountain for a movie, we can't just put a bunch of triangles together. Because triangles don't look like mountains. This doesn't look like a mountain. But what if we follow very simple rules and we keep doing them, okay? And then you might end up with something like this, okay? Very simple rules generates very complicated pattern, all right? Filmmakers and CGI experts will use these techniques now to create natural-looking objects, all right? So this is what a fractal is. And it was this guy here, Benoit Mandelbrot. If I have a hero in mathematics, it's this guy. I wasn't a good math student in high school, but now I seem to be using it all the time. But partly because he found a way to measure all of these amazing things in nature. And he noticed that, I'm just going to read this because it's very important. to realize that clouds are not spheres, they're not circles, okay, or three-dimensional circles. Mountains are not cones, coastlines are not circles, and bark of a tree is not smooth, okay? So nature is very complex, a different level of complexity. So if we want to study nature, we have to embrace and understand complexity. So Mandelbrot had a cool study in the 60s, all right? He asked a simple question: how long is the coast of Britain? Now, if you take geography, you can probably read a textbook that says the coast of Britain is, X kilometers long, or the area of Britain is X square kilometers, or whatever. Mandelbrot said that's not true. It's impossible to measure the coast of Britain because this. If you use a measuring stick, which is like 1 kilometer, you don't get all of the coastline. Then you use a smaller one, you might get more coastline, but not all of the coastline. So now Britain becomes longer. Now we take an even smaller measuring stick, and Britain becomes longer again. So we keep doing this until Britain is the longest thing we've ever seen. But that's not actually true. It is limited. It's a natural thing. Well, actually, the boundary is not natural. It's human, but the island itself is natural. So Mandelbrot's point was, forget about the simple measurement of length. We need a better measure that helps us understand how complex is the coast of Britain. And he found out that it's about as complex as this, 1.25 fractal dimension. That comes up in my talk a lot. And it turns out that this mathematical monster, the Koch snowflake, almost exactly the same fractal dimension, okay? It's interesting stuff here. So math helps us understand natural objects, even very complex ones. But in fact, as I mentioned in the beginning, almost everything we see in nature is fractal in some way or another, in different level of complexity. And here are a bunch of things. So coastlines at the top, galaxies, that's a cool one. What else do we want to look at? Trees and plants, waves and clouds. Sea anemones, that's a good one. Down here, the way bacteria grow, electrical discharges. So many structures in nature are fractal. Now, I have a question for everybody. You see they're actually paintings, okay? You see 3 paintings on the screen. And I want everybody in the audience to put up your hand when I reach the one that you like best. Which one do you like best, okay? Which one makes you happy inside? Let's start on the far left. Anybody? Hands for this one? Okay. How about the middle? Couple people? How about the end? Aha, okay. So this is the least popular. This is probably the most popular. Now, why is that important? A number of years ago, some scientists, this is strange, sometimes scientists like to study art, it turns out. And in this case, the art they're studying is the paintings by Jackson Pollock, famous American painter, all right? And he would paint with this abstract expressionism, they called it. Now physicists call it fractal expressionism, where he would just layer paint on the canvas, throwing it around. But he had a method, okay? And actually, his methods, they started out in the beginning looking like clouds, his paintings. That's down here, fractal dimension of 1.1. And later in his life, well, actually, this is up here, they looked more like trees in a forest, all right? And it changed over time. So physicist Richard Taylor was actually measuring how Jackson Pollock paintings changed over time. It helps them actually, if they find new paintings, and it's dated 1952, it's Jackson Pollock, the art experts can actually check, well, what's the fractal dimension? If it's 1952, it should be around here. So if you see this painting, probably not Jackson Pollock, all right? Anyway, these were 3 Jackson Pollock paintings at different times in his life. And it turns out that humans, we like certain fractal dimension of Jackson Pollock, not just Jackson Pollock, but other things, okay? And you can see here, when the scientists played these different, had people looking at different images, all right? From very simple to very complex, people were choosing the ones that were about here, fractal dimension 1.4, something like that, okay? Across different experiments. And so you see here, these are eye tracking data, so they're following, using technology, where people are looking, all right? And so if I can go to this next one more time, there's 2 Pollock paintings here. Who likes this one, blue poles? Can I see your hands? Hands for blue poles? Hands for number 14? Hands? Yeah? One more time, blue poles? Okay, so almost nobody likes blue poles. The fractal dimension of blue poles is 1.85, okay? It's outside of the human range. But number 14 is right there. And so if you are a human, you probably like number 14 better than blue poles. So we have a preference for some level of complexity. It's across culture as well, okay? It's not just Japan or just America or something. It's many different cultures. And so one of my graduate students at the University of California, Davis, was interested, is it also true in monkeys? Okay? So she did a similar experiment. She showed the same images to a group of monkeys, okay, with eye trackers. And she asked, do monkeys care about fractal dimension? And it turns out they do. So monkeys also prefer they also change their preference with fractal dimension. But you can see it's different from humans. They like really complex or really full images, all right? Not the same as humans, but they have a preference. So they notice the difference in fractal dimension of things around them, which is interesting. She thinks we can use this information to make better living conditions for monkeys, okay? Let's make the environment more complex through fractal dimension. Okay, so humans and monkeys are a little bit different in style, but the mechanism is the same. We recognize fractal dimension. And a lot of things, okay, not just structures, but processes. Like wars, how often do they happen? How many people die? How long do they last? Terrorist social networks, stock markets, communication networks, all kinds of things, right down to evolution and extinction. All of those things happen in fractal time, okay? I'm going to start going faster. There's many biological structures and processes like this. What does it mean? So again, in the 80s, some scientists, medical scientists actually, started to investigate the pattern of physiological structures and processes. So here you have the heart, the blood vessels in the heart, the lungs, and this is a neuron, okay? All of those structures are fractal, all right? And the processes they make, like heartbeats, breathing, and electrical impulses, so neuron firing, all of those are fractal, okay? So here's what's fascinating. This is somebody's heartbeat. It's the gap between heartbeats, okay? How many milliseconds until the next heartbeat? Over time. This is fractal because 300 minutes looks like this. 30 minutes, it still looks the same. 3 minutes, it looks the same. Every scale, it looks the same. It's complicated, it's complex, it's fractal. Now, here's the real important part. This is the normal heartbeat. This is the heartbeat of somebody who has a heart disease. And this is the heartbeat of somebody who is about to die of a heart attack, okay? The beat pattern changes a lot. And the most important thing, it doesn't stop, okay? It doesn't change the average amount of time it's beating, but it changes the structure. It changes the fractal complexity. So healthy hearts are have complex patterns, okay? But diseased hearts, they look like a swinging pendulum, all right? No complexity. So if you think about your heart beating in your chest, you want to say, show me chaos. because the healthy heart has a higher fractal dimension, is more complex in the beating than a diseased heart. And amazingly, it's true for breathing. It's also true for neuron firing in Alzheimer's disease, okay? Chaos in physiology is good. I'm just reiterating that. Chaos in physiology is good. So how does that relate to animal behavior and ecology? Physicists started asking the question, is there a change in fractal dimension or structure when a system has a problem, okay? Like a heart. And it turns out it does. And that brings us right to animal behavior, because animal behavior is a complex system, okay? Animals interacting in nature, finding food, moving around, living in a forest, in the oceans, whatever. What they're doing is very complex, and they create fractal patterns, okay? And so the idea came about that we can use those ideas from physics, from fractal geometry, mathematics, and apply it to studies of animals, all right? And Konrad Lorenz is he's the founder of the study of animal behavior, all right? And he recognized early on that the condition of the animal is very important for how it behaves, okay? Now, don't worry too much about the graphs, but I wanted to highlight to start this that for about a decade, last 10 years, ecologists started to recognize that those animal behavior patterns, movement patterns, are very complex. And they happen with fractal geometry, okay? So it means that if you take how far you move most of the time, it's not that far. But sometimes you move very far. I moved all the way from Canada to Japan. But here, I only move sometimes between Kyoto and Aichi, or between my house and my office. So the more variable it is, the more complex it is. And it turns out that in nature, animals have this very complex kind of pattern of movement, all right? And so if you remember the Pollock paintings, this is not complex, just a line, and this is not complex, just a square, but everything in between is complex, okay, to some level. This is if an animal moves randomly with no pattern, it looks like this. But if an animal moves with chaos, it manages to go to many more places to explore, all right? So that has become important. So this is an actual animal movement track. That's a black-browed albatross. They're a seabird. They forage over the Pacific Oceans. And this is a total track. The small version is here, okay, and it looks similar. And then there's a small version over here. It looks similar. Scale-free, it's fractal. Every scale has the same pattern, all right? And it turns out that when albatrosses are trying to catch food in a very complex environment, where the fish are over here and over here and over here and far away over there, then their pattern looks fractal like this. But if they're catching food when all of the fish are everywhere, just random around the ocean, the area, they don't need to be fractal. They can use a much simpler form of movement, okay? So animals need to be able to change their behavior depending on the environment, all right? From complex to simple. And so to change track, I want to highlight the 2 points from this. The first one is that fractal patterns, they're flexible, okay? A heart beating, if it's in chaos mode, it can adapt to the changing environment. If it's in static mode, it cannot adapt, okay? Same for an animal. If it's in chaos, it can change its behavior easily and regularly to meet the condition. If it's not in chaos, maybe it cannot, okay? So that's error tolerance, the first one. And the second one is, as I just said, complicated search patterns tend to be fractal. It might help animals to find resources more efficiently or better, okay, than simple search patterns. Okay. So my research group has been using these ideas to try and understand variation, like the heartbeats in fractal patterns in animal behavior, all right? And I came up with this figure because I think there should be somewhere some level of complexity, which is the best case for some situation for an animal to behave, okay? And if it starts moving off to one side or to the other side in the behavior pattern, it's not really matching the environment anymore. And it could be a sign of a problem, like diagnosing a problem, all right? And so I'm interested in finding the Goldilocks zone. Everybody know what the Goldilocks zone is? In astronomy, it's Earth, okay? Earth is not too far from the sun. It's not too close to the sun. It's in the Goldilocks zone, all right? So planetary scientists are looking for planets in the Goldilocks zone. I'm looking for animal behavior in the Goldilocks zone of fractal complexity. All right. So how do we do this? I want to step back and get back to President Yamagiwa's talk, because if you want to study animal behavior and ecology, you have to get out to the natural world. So I've been doing that for the last 15 or 20 years, all right? This is a few images of me in Japan, actually, where I've gone to certain field sites, Yakushima, Koshima, to study wild Japanese macaques in their natural habitat and try and generate the complexity profiles. What is normal complexity for these animals, all right? And so that means you have to have close encounters with your study subjects sometimes. You might not be able to get that close, so you might have to do things distantly or remotely. You might be using technology like computers to help you collect data in the field, all right? Makes it easier. So sometimes we use direct observation like this, but other times we don't, all right? So the other half of my life is really about studying penguins, okay, around the world, in Australia, in Antarctica. And with penguins, I can't follow them into the ocean. So I have to find a way to study them remotely. And the way we do that is with biologging technology. We take these devices, which is smaller than a euro, we put them on the penguins, and we map where they are, what they're doing, what they're eating, that sort of thing, all right? And so it allows me to go to cool places like Antarctica and meet cool people, other scientists with similar interests, okay? And monitor animal behavior in some amazing places. But that's how we get the data from which we then start to measure complexity. And this might get a little bit complicated. I'm going to go through kind of quickly, but I want to show the process, okay? If we're studying animal behavior to generate complexity, we're going to start with our animal. Here it's the penguins, Adelie penguins. We get a dive sequence, diving, and penguins are binary. They're underwater or they're not. That's it, okay, as they go. We get a data structure of 1 and 0. We have a time series of 1 and -1, okay? Diving and surface, diving and surface. And because it's fractal, we want to change the scale and we want to measure it. So we measure it, basically we measure the fluctuation of behavior or the complexity at different scales, starting with small scales, going to larger scales, okay, doing the same thing, going to larger scales, doing the same thing. Very simple process with some difficult mathematics. And eventually, this line is telling us how complex the animal's behavior is, all right? Very simple process in the end. And I can use that measure for almost anything. It's the same as the fractal dimension. I can measure clouds, I could measure mountains, I can measure animal behavior, I can measure my heart using the same technique, all right? And this is what it looks like. It's a penguin diving and coming up over a full day, all right? This is 5 different penguins doing the same thing. So they all have different complexity profiles, okay? And I want to use those to understand differences in their behavior. And ultimately, we're using this system as a way to understand how well animals are behaving in their natural environments, okay? If we know something about the environment, we'll know something about how good the behavior matches to the environment. And so I mentioned this complexity index, it can go up or it can go down. It can be moving animals or a time series, like behaving over time animals. And we can relate that complexity to like climate change, for example, human disturbance of habitats, animal welfare and animal health in the zoo or in a laboratory, or even in your home, okay? If you want to know if your dog is healthy, you can use these techniques. And especially how animals respond to natural challenges, okay? So these are a couple of my main collaborators in this. We're really using complexity to indicate some problem in the natural world with animals. And over the years we've learned a lot of things. For animal condition, you know, if animals like fish or mosquitoes, if they're being poisoned with some toxins, then they lose complexity. The fractal complexity changes in those animals, and we can see it. So we know there's something wrong with that animal, all right? For Japanese macaques and Spanish ibex, it's their general health, reproduction, parasite infection. It changes their behavior in a way we can measure using this fractal complexity. Dolphins are sensitive to human disturbance, okay? So their diving and surface behavior changes when there are humans around, and we can use that to predict how healthy they are in the environment. Penguins and Japanese quail are sensitive to stress. So we can detect stressed individuals by measuring the fractal complexity of their behavior. And if I put it all together, this is an example with Japanese macaques. You can see here, this is one sick monkey, and this is one healthy monkey. One day sick, one day healthy, the same monkey, all right? On the first day, not so much variability, okay? Not very complex. The pattern is very simple, and you know, the complexity score is like this. On the next day, very complex. A lot of change in behavior, okay? And timing of behavior. And in the end, very complex behavior sequence. And in the end, much more complex fractal complexity, okay? So we can use this measure to indicate the condition of the animal. But what does it mean for the environment? Another graduate student of mine, until recently, Xavier Meyer, who was working in France, was looking at penguins, and penguins in different colonies. This is Australia and New Zealand. And we're interested, how does the complexity profile change in those individuals? And what we see is that it does change across those colonies, okay? They don't behave the same way in each colony. And what we think is happening, so this is Penguin Island and Oamaru, okay? Not very complex behavior. And the water is not so deep. Shallow water, okay? So we think it's easy for the penguins to find food. And the food is evenly distributed in the environment, all right? But in Phillip Island, the water is very deep. It's dark blue here, it's very deep. And it changes a lot, okay? So it's harder for the penguins to find food. And we can see it. We can see it in the fractal complexity signature, all right? And it's interesting that if the penguins need, if they have high foraging success, it's very much related to the complexity, all right? So easier, like places here and here, where it's easier to forage, they have better success, all right? And the opposite is true for effort. If it's very hard to find food, they need high complexity, but they're not being very successful, okay? So I just want to highlight this complexity profile changes across environments, and we can use it to understand how well the animal will succeed in its environment, just by using this behavior sequence, okay? Or that's what we try to do, all right? And again, the whole goal of this activity is to use a very simple index of behavior from the natural world to understand how the condition of the animal and the quality of the environment, okay? This is work still in progress, but we've learned a lot of interesting things so far, and we're excited about the future of being able to use this very simple index to understand a lot more about complexity in the natural world. And move on to the next part of my talk, okay? We're still kind of talking about complexity because social networks, as you'll see, happen to be very complex things, all right? So I want to step back a little bit. Humans are social animals, okay? You probably would not do very well if you were living by yourself forever. But many animals do that. We don't. We are social animals, social primates. Most primates are social, all right? But why are we social? It's an interesting evolutionary question, okay? There's a few possibilities. The first one is we have no choice. It's boring. It's not a good explanation for most social animals, but some, like some birds, okay, they have to use the same tree, so they become social by default, but not actively interacting, okay? So let's forget it. Sharing information, okay? All of these pictures show you how animals share information. If one bird flies away, the other birds fly away because there might be a predator around, okay? If one bird finds food, other birds might follow it to find food, okay? So they get extra information. If one elephant knows where to go, the other elephants will follow that elephant, okay? A lot of advantage from your friends, from other individuals of your species to provide information. And of course, animals get protection from being social, okay? So here are some meerkats in the African savanna. They're all looking around for predators. The more eyes you have, the more chance you'll find those predators. Here, it's a little different. If a lion attacks a buffalo and a buffalo has a friend, it might get some support, okay? So that's a very important benefit of being social. We can help each other. We can give each other information, and we can protect each other when we're in danger. But here's the thing. Even if you're social, how social are you? In all of these cases, it's actually even better if you are in the middle of your social network. If you're central, okay, you have a lot of social partners. You can get more information. You can find more food or other things. You have more individuals to protect you, all right? So the next part of my talk is really about being central in a social network. So two very interesting and exciting studies that came out in the last few years, which are about social networks and about the evolution of being social. So let me show you what's happening here. On the left side, what you see here, every red dot is a sheep, just one sheep in a field. And the blue dot is a sheepdog. So what do sheepdogs do? They chase the sheep to move them to some place. It's like a predator, right? If you're a sheep and a dog comes, it's like a wolf. A dog is a wolf. So the sheep are trying to protect themselves individually. So this is what you see. The dog is going to get the signal from a human, and the dog is going to approach the sheep. Immediately, every single sheep is trying to get to the center of the group, okay? That's all they're doing. It's not complicated. They want to be in the middle because the ones on the outside are getting attacked by the dog, okay? Not really, but they would be. That's called a selfish herd. So to be central is very important. On the second one, what you have is every bird here is a pigeon, and the line is the direction of their, not the direction, the tail of their flight path, where they're flying, okay? And so some scientists were interested in how do pigeons fly together? And it looks like this. So what you see is this yellow, the yellow line, that's the bird right here, is the leader. It's not always in the front. but all of the other birds are following it anyway, okay? So that yellow bird has an advantage. It's the leader. It can go wherever it wants, and the other birds follow it. Why? Maybe that bird has information, or maybe that bird is dominant. In any case, this is the result of a social network and how it creates very complicated behavior. Both of these look very complicated, but both of them are very simple. Sheep trying to get to the middle. I don't want to get bitten by a dog. Birds, I follow the leader. How about you? I was looking at this figure, a recent figure of social networks around the world. So Facebook has about more than 2 billion users now. But you look at Japan, so is it true? How many people use Facebook? Facebook. How many people use Twitter? Yeah. So it's surprising. If you're in Canada or the US, it's quite the opposite. But anyways, Twitter is your social network of choice, okay? But social networks are very important for us. We benefit a lot. And even the virtual, digital social networks like this. We learn a lot from our networks. We can schedule things. We plan our behaviors, okay? We get information. We almost cannot imagine a world without digital social networks anymore. You probably interact more with Twitter than your friends in real life. So here's my social network, my Facebook network from 4 years ago, all right? I want to use this to show you something about how networks work and how important certain people in your network are, all right? So this is a social network of about 300 people. I'm not there. It's just my friends, how my friends are connected to my friends, okay? So up here, this is my family, okay? That's subgroup 1, it's my family. Subgroup 2 is it's high school, okay? Like you guys, this is my high school network, okay? This is my summer camp. I used to go to summer camp. I used to work at summer camp. That's my summer camp network. This is my professional network, okay? Now, professional networks are important for people to develop their careers, all right? But what you see is that all of these networks, it's all one network, but they're not all connected completely, okay? Not completely connected. Now, here's something interesting. Every circle is a person, and the size of the circle is how many connections they have in my network. So this really dark blue circle is very connected to all of my professional network. Who is it? Anybody? Who is that person? Think about it. Who would it be? Anybody want to try? I'll give you the answer. It's my PhD advisor, right? So he is the person that brought me into my professional world. And so he has the most connections in my entire network of 300 people. Now, here's something interesting. This is the same network, but the size of the circles and the color is it's not the number of connections they have. It's how much in the center they are, okay? So this person right here, this person connects my professional network with my summer camp network, with my family network, and my school network. Who is this person? Anybody? It's not my PhD advisor, he's still down here. It's my wife. Yeah. My wife is really central in my network. She knows all of my groups of friends on purpose. She doesn't want to have any groups of friends that she doesn't know. But this is natural, okay, in a human social network, all right? But it's also important to realize that these people, okay, my PhD advisor, if I want my professional network to know something, I tell Mike, and then everybody knows. If I want all of my network to know something, I tell my wife, okay? She's very important. But there's a lot of different types of networks out there, okay? And if you think about how does information move on a network, okay? It goes from one person to the next to the next. In this case, everybody has the same number of partners, all right? It's a very boring network. This is a random network. This one is a small world network. Some people connect this world with this world, okay? This is, forget about this one. This is a fractal network. And if you are part of a fractal network, one person could have a very big impact on the information of that network, okay? Like the internet. The internet is a fractal scale-free network, okay? This is about 1/3 of the internet 10 years ago or something like that. And it's interesting, so the yellow color here, that's like China or Japan, and all the IP addresses connecting to each other at certain websites. The blue ones are like .coms, .org, green. Blue ones, .nets, .us. It's not completely overlapping, right? Some parts exist in the network, but they're connected by very connected IP addresses, right? Like my wife or my PhD advisor. So the study of networks, network science, started almost a decade ago. This was one of the very first social networks ever built by wow, I'm getting low on time, by a sociologist. And it just, he asked kids, high school kids, who do you want to live with? All right, so they said, I want to live with this person. And it's connecting all of these different houses around. This is the very first non-human social network. It's monkeys, rhesus monkeys, and it's a family. So that's a female and all of her offspring, okay? So people became interested in social networks to understand the relationship structure. I just did a search on the Web of Science. It's a science database for published studies. And as of this morning, almost 110,000 scientific papers on social networks. 110,000, all right? That's a lot. It's a long way from here, okay? And most of them are in computer science, okay? Computer networks, that's obvious, IT. Engineering. You have to go way down to number 38 and number 44 to get to my interest, which is in animal behavior and infectious disease, ecology. That's what I study, okay? So why are networks important? You get information. This is interesting. I don't know if any of you have found this study. It's a Japanese study that was looking at slime mold. It's a single-celled creature that can be asocial or social. And the researchers made a petri dish, and they used light to make it look like the area around Tokyo, okay? And they put food at Tokyo and all of the cities around Tokyo that are connected by the Tokyo transport system, trains, basically, not just the metro. And what's amazing is the slime mold, it starts just one cell, and by the end, it covers that whole area, but it covers like this. It doesn't just spread out. It uses very direct pathways to each station of food. It's slime mold. It doesn't have a brain, but it recreates the Tokyo Metro transport network, okay? This is nature. This is nature. So it's telling you that nature will try and find an efficient way to work, all right? And that's an important thing about networks. So social networks have a lot of benefits. If you're a baboon and you're the center of your social network, you have a longer lifespan, okay? A longer lifespan. That's important. If you are a forked fungus beetle, okay, and you have a stronger social network, you get more sex. If you're a male, okay, that's all males really want anyway in the natural world, all right? So being socially central has a big benefit, all right? If you're a Japanese macaque and you have a lot of grooming partners, you have fewer lice. So this female is grooming another female, and in a second you're going to see she picks up something from the hair, all right, like that. And she eats it. That's the egg of a louse. Shirami no tamago. Okay? When they do that, they remove lice from their partners. So if you are a female that has more social partners, you have fewer lice. It's a big benefit for animals to avoid parasites. If you are a tit, like a blue tit, and you have a strong social network, you're one of the black, dark gray dots, it's more likely for you to find food, okay? So you find food easier, all right? So that's also important. So all of these things are the benefits of being social and having social networks, but there are also many costs. And as an evolutionary scientist, I'm always interested in the trade-off. You have cost and benefit. How do we manage it? One of the costs of being social is getting sick. As soon as I had children, I have 2 kids, 6 years and 2 years. When they started hoikuen, I became sick every month because my children are picking up viruses from all of their network and giving it to me. That's natural. So being sick is part of living in a social network. It's also true for Japanese macaques. For my PhD study, I discovered that, first of all, this is grooming networks of Japanese macaques. High-ranking monkeys are in the middle. What's interesting is high-ranking monkeys also get more parasites, all right? So this is natural. Being central has a cost. So there are a lot of different types of parasites. I won't spend any time with this. So we always have to consider how they move around between the population. But we've started a project to look at a lot of different types of things and how they move in social networks. They could be lice that are directly going between. They could be bacteria, which come out in your poop, all right, and end up in some other monkey's mouth, unfortunately. You might have intestinal parasites, or you might be a virus that's transmitted by biting, okay? A lot of different types of social network involved, a lot of different ways to move between individuals. These are my collaborators on this project. But we know from human studies that if you are very socially central, you probably spread disease faster. It's true for, it's true for diseases that are caused by HIV and SARS, but not for Ebola. Why? If you get Ebola, you can't be social. You're already too sick, all right? So anyway, most of our modern diseases can transmit very quickly if they find the right person, okay? So if you are very socially central and you have friends, tell your friends to be careful. So previously, we used to measure the spread of infectious disease with this kind of model, thinking that everybody mixes with everybody, okay? So everybody is just as likely to become infected than anybody else. It's not true, because in reality, we make social networks. So if this person is infected and I'm here, I can just relax for a while, because that thing is not going to come to me until it makes its way all the way around like this or all the way around like this, okay? So we must understand social networks, how complex they are, what style they are, if we want to understand how things spread, information but also disease. So back to Japanese macaques. As a complex primate, they form complex social networks. This is a social network from Koshima in Miyazaki. This is a social network from Yakushima. They look almost the same, with one big difference, and it's here. Modularity means how much substructure, how many subgroups are there in the network. In the Yakushima forest, there are many more subgroups than Koshima. They have a higher modularity. So what does it mean? In Koshima, those high-ranking female spreads disease really quickly to all of her partners. This is just computer simulation. Low-ranking females, not so much, all right? That's, as I said before, social centrality, faster spread, faster getting sick. But in Yakushima, so this is a complicated graph, I realize, but here's what I want you to do. Think about the blue line and if the blue line looks the same or different than the red line. Here, the blue line is increasing in all cases. That means if you're central, you are spreading disease to more individuals and you're getting sick faster, okay? But that's in Koshima. In Yakushima, the blue line here for getting an infection is the same as the red line. The red line is random. So the Yakushima social network it's behaving more random than the Koshima network. And it's probably because those monkeys subgroup a lot more. Yakushima is very big. Koshima is very small, all right? And so the type of network determines how those infections spread through the network. So if we understand what the network looks like, it can help us predict what will happen if an outbreak happens in humans or in animals, in nature. And if it's really bad, like Ebola in chimpanzees, some people even think if we know the network, we can pick the very central chimpanzees, usually males, and we can vaccinate them with some drug to stop the spread of Ebola, okay? And that's for conservation, to save those animals in the wild. So understanding how complex the networks are really helps us understand these complex patterns. And so just to show one last time here, these are 3 different types of networks: connected, modular, star. And if you simulate disease, in 100% of the cases, more individuals get infected in this model than in this model, okay? Because subgroups slow down infection. It slows down infection. So with a few collaborators, another graduate student, Valeria Romano, who's defending her PhD next Friday, we developed a model. It's a theoretical model because we're interested in the trade-off. Individual behavior, and they interact with each other. They make edges, links between other individuals. They build a social network. They can get information, but they also get parasites. How do they balance those 2 things? Our model looks like this. It's a bit complicated, but these are all the different possibilities, okay? Orange is how much information they have. Blue is how much disease they have. If you're connected to a friend that has a lot of information, it's great for you. But if they're always sick, it's not good for you, okay? So how do you build a social network from that? So the last activity I have is really about four examples, okay? My question, so here, information, a lot of information, no disease. A lot of disease, 0 disease, no change in information. A lot of disease, no information, and it's the same. Which network will give you the star, okay? The star is only one individual at the center of the network, okay? You can think about it. I'll give you the answer in a second. It's not this one, because nobody is sick. So all of the individuals can interact with each other. It's not really this one, because some individuals are sick, others are not, but everybody has the same information. So there's still value in connecting with those individuals. But it's actually this one, because nobody has information, right? And there's some disease in the population, so they pick one individual with no disease and they completely interact with that individual, all right? And here's more or less a full network with that condition. So we're trying to understand how networks evolve with these conditions. And with that, I just want to finish my talk. 2 different aspects of organization and behavior and how we use complexity to understand ecology on those systems. And there are a lot of people involved in this study, which I have to thank through these images. But I want to finish with a story. I'm sorry I'm going over my time. When I was in high school, this was 1993, okay? I was in grade 10. The movie Jurassic Park came out. Has anybody seen Jurassic Park? Yeah? So Jurassic Park has a few main characters. The best ones for me at that time were Dr. Alan Grant and the paleobotanist Sattler, okay? Because they were studying dinosaurs and ancient plants, all right? In the natural world, and I loved nature. I wanted to be a biologist, okay? So I really loved them. There was another character. He's called Dr. Ian Malcolm. He's a mathematician, actually a chaotician, all right? He studied nonlinear dynamics, and he predicted Jurassic Park would fail and have many problems, and dinosaurs would eat people. And he was right. But when I watched that movie, I wanted to be Dr. Alan Grant. When I think back to it now, I'm kind of Dr. Alan Grant because I go to the field and I study animals, but I'm just as much Dr. Ian Malcolm. So I think for all of you, when you think about what you can do, don't narrow your idea down to one field so much. You have so much opportunity, and places like Kyoto University have so much opportunity to mix disciplines and to cross boundaries, and you can discover many more new things that way. So for research, I've been to all of these different places, all right, and I've had amazing times doing that and learning so much about the natural world. And so I like to think, that this is my playground. I came from this place here. It's a city in the middle of Canada, and most amazingly for me, ended up on Antarctica. But I think this is possible for everybody. So I want to close by saying this is my playground. What's yours?